If you sleep with this Apache slave right here, I'll give your ranch back. If not, take her and get out." The young rancher had mortgaged his land to save his dying mother, but 3 months later she passed away. When he returned to buy the ranch back, the landowner gave him a demand that shocked the entire town. He arrived in the late afternoon heat, dust lifting around his boots as he stepped off his black horse and stared at the grand white house rising above the center of town. 3 months ago, he had walked up these same steps holding the deed to his small ranch, praying for mercy, begging for time, trading everything he had left so his dying mother could breathe a little longer. Now she was gone, buried beneath a simple wooden cross on a silent hill, and all he wanted was to reclaim the land she had loved. He thought he would be negotiating money, debt, maybe pride. He never expected to walk into a nightmare. People gathered the moment they saw him, curious, whispering, pitying. The town always had stories, and many involved the rich landowner who lived in that large, polished house with its towering porch and unnecessary decadence. They called him a man of wealth, power, and 5 wives, but they also called him Twisted, a collector of bodies and pleasures. When the cowboy stepped through the open gate, he felt eyes watching from behind curtains, waiting for the next rumor to be born. The landowner stood on his porch with a smug smile, hands tucked behind his back like a judge ready to announce a sentence. "Back so soon," he said, voice coated with false sympathy. "I was expecting you, boy." The cowboy was 30, but to this man, everyone without power was a child. He swallowed his anger and kept his voice level. "I came to repay what I owe. The ranch, my mother's ranch. I want it back." The landowner nodded slowly, savoring the moment. Yes, I remember. A touching story. A boy trying to save his mother from the claws of death. Tragic ending. But business is business." He gestured to the side of the porch. "And today, business has changed." When the cowboy looked, he froze. A young Apache woman, no older than 23, was tied to a thick wooden post at the edge of the house. Her wrists were bound behind her, ankles tied to the base, body pulled tight in a position that stripped her of dignity. Her long dark hair clung to her shoulders, her skin bruised from rough handling, and yet her eyes, sharp, burning, defiant, refused to break. She had been left there for 2 days, the townsfolk murmured, punished for biting a servant who tried to force himself on her. The landowner had bought her like cattle. Now she was decoration for entertainment, a living warning of his control. The cowboy's stomach turned. He took a step forward. "Why is she tied like that?" "Disobedience," the landowner replied with ease. "A wild one, fierce, untamed. They always are, but she'll learn." He walked down the steps, stopping a foot from the cowboy, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "I've been thinking. Your ranch is worth a certain amount of money, yet I find myself bored with money." A slow grin spread across his face. "So let us make a new deal. Something more entertaining." The cowboy's jaw tightened. "What deal?" The landowner stepped aside and pointed at the Apache girl. "If you sleep with her, right here, in front of everyone, I'll return the ranch to you." The words fell like a gunshot. People gasped. Others laughed, nervous, horrified, excited. A whisper ran through the gathering crowd. The cowboy felt heat hit his face, but not from the sun. Shame, anger, disbelief pulsed through him all at once. He looked again at the girl, at the way she glared at the landowner, not pleading, not begging, but resisting even with nothing left to resist with. "You're insane," the cowboy said quietly. "No," the landowner chuckled. "I'm generous. You get your land back, you get a woman, and you fulfill a fantasy most men would kill for." He leaned close. "You've never touched a woman, have you? 30 years old, living alone on a dry patch of dirt. This is a blessing, son." He didn't answer, but the landowner saw the truth in his silence. The crowd added pressure. "Do it," someone shouted. "It's easy," another yelled. "Take the deal, cowboy. You get your ranch." His heart hammered in his chest. His mother's voice echoed in his head. Dignity is the last thing a man owns, and no one can take it unless he gives it away. He looked again at the Apache girl, her breathing sharp, her shoulders trembling from exhaustion, but her spirit still unbroken. To use her, to touch her in this humiliation, would make him no different than the monster standing beside him. He stepped forward anyway, not toward the landowner, but toward her. The crowd leaned in, expecting the spectacle they had been promised. The cowboy stood inches from the girl, his hand rising, not to undo her clothing, but to rest gently on the knots binding her wrists. Her eyes widened, confused, and then he stopped. The world seemed to hold its breath. He slowly lowered his hand, turned his back to the crowd, and faced the landowner. "I'm not doing this." The landowner blinked. "Excuse me?" "I'm taking her," the cowboy said, voice steady, controlled, dangerous. "She is the price. The ranch can burn. I won't let you touch her again." Gasps erupted. The crowd erupted into shock and derision. "Fool!" someone yelled. "He's lost his mind." Another laughed. But the cowboy walked straight to the post, pulled out his knife, and cut the ropes. The Apache girl stumbled forward, catching herself before she fell. He didn't touch her beyond what was necessary, giving her room, giving her choice. She stared at him, stunned, not understanding why he had done it, but knowing it mattered. Then he spat at the landowner's boots. "That's my answer." The landowner's face twisted with rage. "You'll regret this. You'll have nothing." The cowboy didn't look back. With nothing remaining but his black horse and a wagon half filled with what little life he had left, he helped the Apache girl climb up, settled onto the saddle, and rode out of town as the sun bled into the horizon. Two strangers, bound by circumstance and dignity, leaving behind a world that had already judged them. The moment the cowboy cut the ropes, the world around him shifted. Subtly at first, like the sharp inhale before a storm, then violently as the crowd erupted into disbelief. They couldn't understand it. They didn't want to. In their eyes, he had just thrown away the easiest bargain any man could dream of. A ranch saved. A woman handed to him. A shameful act witnessed by all, but an act most of them would have committed without hesitation. Yet he had walked away from it all as if the decision weighed nothing. It weighed everything. The Apache girl rubbed her wrists as she stumbled beside him, her legs shaking from 2 days tied upright in the sun. The cowboy didn't touch her, simply opened space for her to choose whether she wanted help. She refused it, tightening her jaw and lifting her chin with pride. Even half-starved and bruised, she wouldn't let herself appear weak. The townspeople watched every step she took, some whispering slurs, others teasing, a few simply staring with pity. But she looked at none of them. Instead, she stole a glance at the cowboy, his shoulders stiff, his jaw clenched, but his eyes steady and clear. The landowner's voice roared behind them. "You think you can humiliate me and walk away? That girl is mine. That ranch is mine. And you." He pointed a trembling finger. "You are finished." The cowboy didn't stop walking. He didn't turn around. He simply spit in the dirt again, the gesture carrying more meaning than words ever could. It wasn't just a refusal. It was war. They reached his horse and wagon at the end of the dusty street. The Apache girl hesitated for only a moment before climbing into the back of the wagon, moving like someone afraid to collapse. The cowboy loosened the reins, mounted the saddle, and with one firm pull, the black horse moved forward, leaving the town and its judgment behind. The countryside stretched wide and quiet around them, the golden plains glowing under the setting sun. For the first few miles, neither spoke. The cowboy kept his eyes ahead, trying to control the mess swirling inside him. His ranch was gone, his future erased in a heartbeat. Yet he didn't regret the choice. Something in the girl's eyes had stopped him, something fierce, something human. As the sky darkened, the girl shifted inside the wagon, wincing as she sat upright. "Why?" she asked softly, the word accented but clear. "Why did you do that?" He didn't answer at first. He kept riding. Then he exhaled slowly. Because I wasn't going to let him break either of us. She blinked, processing his meaning. You don't know me. No, he said. But that doesn't matter. She paused, absorbing that in silence. They rode on until the distant noise of the town faded completely. When they finally stopped near a dry creek bed, dusk had turned to night. The cowboy fed the horse, lit a lantern, and returned to the wagon where the girl watched him cautiously. He handed her a blanket, then stepped back. You can rest inside, he said. I'll stay out here. Why? She asked again, suspicion drilling into every syllable. Because it's safer that way, he replied. For you. Something softened, just a fraction, in her expression. She pulled the blanket around her shoulders and settled back, still wary but no longer bracing herself like an animal waiting for the next blow. The cowboy sat on an overturned crate outside the wagon, staring at the stars as if searching for the version of his life he had just abandoned. The wind whispered across the plains, carrying with it the memory of his mother's voice, the smell of the old ranch, the years of sweat and labor. Gone. All of it. Yet he knew one thing. He could still walk with his head high. After some time, the girl spoke from inside the wagon. They said, "You never touch woman before." His chest tightened, embarrassed not by the truth itself, but by how loudly the landowner had thrown it into the public air. Doesn't matter, he muttered. She shifted. Then why? You could have taken me, saved your land. The cowboy turned slightly, seeing only her silhouette behind the canvas. Because if I did that, I'd lose something worse than land. What? Myself. The wagon went quiet. The wind carried their shared silence across the empty night, a silence that wasn't cold anymore, just thoughtful. After a long moment she whispered, "Most men are not like you." He didn't respond, unsure what to do with those words. When the cold deepened, he lit a small fire. Its glow cast gentle light on the wagon. He warmed a tin of milk and leftover bread, dividing what little he had. When he approached the wagon, she watched him with suspicion, softened by exhaustion. He offered the food without stepping closer than necessary. She hesitated, then accepted it. "Thank you," she murmured. "For what happened back there," she added. "No one ever." She stopped, unable to finish. He nodded, understanding more than she said aloud. They ate quietly, and when she finished, she lay down in the wagon, wrapped in the blanket. Her breathing steadied. The cowboy watched her for a long moment, not with desire, not with fear, but with a sense of responsibility he didn't fully understand yet. He turned away and kept the fire alive, making sure she stayed warm. Hours passed. The night settled like a heavy coat over the plains. Finally, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "You gave up everything today." He looked toward the stars. "Sometimes the right thing costs more than you want, but it's still the right thing." She stared at him through the dim firelight, studying him in a way no one ever had. Then she said something unexpected, something that would change the course of his life. "I will help you, if you trust me." He didn't answer then. He didn't know how, but deep down, he knew the choice he made had already opened a road he was no longer walking alone, and though he wouldn't realize it until much later, the moment he freed her was not the moment he lost his ranch. It was the moment he found his future. They left before dawn the next morning, a thin mist hanging low over the ground as the horse pulled the wagon forward. The cowboy kept a slow pace, careful not to jostle the Apache girl, who still carried bruises from her punishment. She sat inside the wagon at first, wrapped in the blanket he'd given her, silent and watchful. He could feel her gaze on the back of his shoulders, not hostile, not afraid, just measuring him the way a survivor measures the world, searching for danger, searching for truth. The road out of town curved through empty plains and lonely scrubland, the kind of place where time moved slower and thoughts grew louder. The cowboy didn't mind silence. He had lived most of his life in it. But this silence felt different. He caught himself listening for her voice, wondering what she thought, wondering who she had been before chains changed everything. They traveled for hours before the sun climbed high enough to turn the air warm. Eventually, the girl pushed aside the wagon flap and stepped down carefully to walk beside the horse. Her legs trembled at first, but she forced them steady. "You don't have to walk," he said. She lifted her chin slightly. "I choose to." He accepted that without argument. She walked a few paces behind him, then beside him, then finally at the same rhythm, each step revealing a little more trust. When the wind shifted, he caught the faint scent of smoke and leather on her clothes, the remnants of her ordeal. Without thinking, he removed his hat, wiping sweat from his brow, offering a small, quiet sign of respect. Not pity, not charity, simply acknowledgement. Hours passed before she finally spoke. "My name is Ayasha." He repeated it softly, almost afraid of breaking its shape. "Ayasha." She nodded once. "What is your name?" He hesitated. A name had weight. A name meant connection. "Elias," he said at last. Ayasha's lips curved slightly. Not a smile, but close. "Elias," she repeated. A strong name. He didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. By midday, the sun pressed heavy on them. Elias stopped near a cluster of rocks for shade. He watered the horse, then handed Ayasha the canteen. She drank carefully, mindful of how little they had, then passed it back without a word. When he opened a small bag of food, just jerky and a crumbling biscuit, he split it evenly. She hesitated, then accepted. They sat side by side on the ground, eating in silence. But this time, the silence didn't feel harsh. It felt like the beginning of something, fragile, uncertain, but real. Ayasha was the first to break it. "You lost your mother," she said gently. "I heard them say it." He nodded once, eyes on the horizon. 3 months ago. The ranch was her whole life. I mortgaged it to pay for medicine. She didn't survive. Ayasha studied him for a long moment. "You carry her grief on your shoulders like armor." He didn't know how she saw that so easily. No one else ever had. "And you?" he asked, equally soft. "What do you carry?" Her breath tightened. She looked away before answering. "My family thought I was dead. I was taken on a hunting trip, by men from the north. Sold from one camp to another until the landowner bought me." She swallowed hard. "I thought I would never go home again." Elias listened, the weight of her words settling deep inside him. "I'm sorry," he said. Ayasha glanced at him, her eyes sharp, almost defensive. "Do not pity me." "I don't," he said honestly. "But I'm sorry for what they did." That she accepted. When they resumed their journey, Ayasha climbed back into the wagon only long enough to rest her legs. She didn't sleep. She watched the land passing by, memorizing every shape of the earth, as if mapping her way back to a life she refused to let go of. As the sun dipped low, they halted near a shallow ravine dotted with juniper bushes. Elias gathered wood for a fire while Ayasha searched for kindling. They worked together without speaking, each movement careful but natural, like two people learning the edges of a fragile partnership. When the fire crackled, warming the cool evening air, they sat beside each other. Elias boiled what little milk remained in an old tin cup, mixing it with a bit of crushed bread. He handed it to Ayasha first. She sipped, her expression softening with relief. "It tastes like home," she said, surprising herself. Elias looked into the fire, not wanting her to see how those words affected him. "I'm glad." The night deepened, stars spilling across the sky like scattered promises. Ayasha rested inside the wagon, lying on her side with the blanket pulled tight, her breathing slow but restless. Elias stayed outside again, leaning against the wheel, eyes open, hand resting near the revolver at his hip. Not because he feared her, but because the unbroken land around them held dangers of its own. Hours later, Ayasha spoke through the canvas. "You don't sleep." "Not much," he murmured. "Are you afraid I will run?" "No," he said. If you wanted to, you already would have. After a long pause, she whispered, I stay because you did not take from me. You gave me back something. What? My choice. Her words struck deeper than she knew. Sometime near midnight, Ayasha shifted and poked her head out from the wagon. Her hair fell over her shoulders in loose waves, no longer stiff with dirt, but soft in the moonlight. You are cold, she said. I'm fine. She looked at him for a long, steady moment, then offered half the blanket. We share. You saved me. I save you from the cold. He hesitated, unsure how to interpret the gesture. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't suggestive. It was simply human. He took the edge of the blanket and draped it across his shoulders, careful to keep enough distance to respect her comfort. They sat like that, separated but connected by a shared warmth neither fully understood. Ayasha watched the firelight dance across his face. Elias, she said softly, tomorrow I will tell you how to find my people. He turned to her, surprised. They will help you, she continued. Help you take back what was stolen. Help you because you helped me first. He didn't know whether to believe it, but the calm certainty in her voice felt like truth. Two strangers in one wagon. Two wounded souls sharing bread, fire, silence, and the first fragile threads of trust. By the time dawn touched the horizon again, they were no longer simply traveling together. They were beginning to belong to the same road. They reached the edge of the desert by late morning, the land widening into an endless sweep of pale sand and sun-beaten rock. The heat shimmered in rising waves, turning the horizon into a trembling blur. Elias led the horse at a slow and steady pace, mindful of Ayasha's lingering weakness. She walked beside him, her steps steadier than the day before, though she still favored her right leg where the rope burns were deepest. Each hour carved a deeper silence between them, not uncomfortable, but heavy with unspoken questions. Ayasha finally broke the quiet. You must trust me, she said. Her voice was firmer now, the strength returning to her body and piece by piece to her spirit. My people, they will understand what happened. They will help you get back what you lost. Elias didn't respond immediately. He kept his eyes on the landscape ahead, the dry wind brushing against his face. Trust wasn't something he gave easily, not to anyone, and certainly not to someone whose world he didn't understand. But Ayasha spoke with a certainty that made her words hard to dismiss. She wasn't begging. She wasn't bargaining. She was offering something that sounded like a promise. He stopped walking and turned to face her. If I take you home, what happens to you? To us? What if your people think I stole you? Ayasha met his gaze without flinching. I will speak for myself. They will listen. They will see the truth. She paused. But I cannot return alone. The journey is dangerous, and I want you to meet them. Elias searched her face, trying to understand the flicker in her eyes. It wasn't fear. It wasn't desperation. It was something more complicated, something tied to the long road behind them and the uncertain one ahead. We travel together, she continued, or we get lost. That is how the desert works. He looked at the horizon again. Trust. The word felt heavier than the sun pressing down on them. We'll stop first, he said finally. There's something I have to do. She nodded, understanding even before he explained. She had seen the way he spoke about his mother, the way grief rested quietly in the corners of his eyes. They rode westward until the desert gave way to rolling grass and scattered juniper. Hours later, they reached the small hill where Elias had buried his mother. It wasn't much, just a mound of earth under a crooked cedar tree, but it was the closest thing he had to a sacred place. Ayasha stayed at the base of the hill while he climbed to the top, removing his hat with slow, deliberate movements. The grave marker was simple. A wooden cross he had carved himself, the name Anna Gray, etched into the grain. He knelt, resting both hands on the dry earth. For a long time, he said nothing. The wind whispered across the hill, lifting strands of his hair, rustling the brittle grass. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. Ma, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if I'm making the right choices, but I couldn't." He stopped, swallowing hard. "I couldn't let that man use her. Not while you're watching. You taught me better than that." He closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the world pressing harder than ever. "I lost the ranch," he said quietly. "I lost everything, except her." As if sensing the shift in his voice, Ayasha slowly approached, stopping a respectful distance behind him. She didn't interrupt. She didn't intrude. She simply waited, her presence steady as the earth beneath them. Elias rested his palm flat against the wooden cross. "If you can hear me, Ma, I hope I'm worthy of the choices I've made." He rose slowly, dusting his hands, and turned toward Ayasha. Her eyes softened, not in pity, but in understanding. Loss recognized loss. "I'm ready," he said. She nodded once. "Then we go." They began the journey toward her homeland the same afternoon, their path leading deeper into harsher terrain. The sky stretched vast and unforgiving above them, the land cracked and brittle beneath their feet. Ayasha guided him with certainty, pointing out hidden water sources, narrow passes, and safe places to rest. Every step she took illuminated pieces of a world he had never known. Despite the growing exhaustion, their conversations grew easier, more natural. "Your mother loved you deeply," Ayasha said one evening as the sun dipped behind the ridges. "I can hear her in the way you speak." Elias glanced at her. "How can you tell?" "Because you carry her with you," she replied. "Not all men do that. Some bury grief and let it die. You keep it alive." He wasn't sure whether that was strength or weakness, but the way she said it made it feel like honor. That night, they made camp beneath a cluster of sharp, wind-twisted rocks. Elias built a small fire. Ayasha collected dry brush with ease, moving efficiently despite her fatigue. When she sat across from him, the firelight flickering across her face, he realized how much she had changed since he untied her. Her posture straighter, her expression less guarded, her eyes brighter with purpose. "You should sleep," he said gently. "You're still healing." Ayasha shook her head. "Tonight we talk. Tomorrow we reach the canyon. Beyond it, my people." He nodded, bracing himself. "You trusted me today," she said. "At your mother's grave. I did. And tomorrow, you must trust me again. When my people see you, they will draw bows. They will ask questions. They will decide if you are friend or threat." "What should I do?" Elias asked. "Stand tall," she said. "Do not reach for your gun, and do not lie. They value truth more than strength." He absorbed her words carefully. She leaned forward, her voice softening. "Elias, what you did for me in that town will be remembered. You chose my dignity over your land, my freedom over your pride. My tribe honors actions like that." He exhaled slowly. "I hope they believe you." "They will." Her voice didn't waver. "And they will help you reclaim what was stolen. I promise." A promise in the desert could mean everything, or nothing. But when Elias looked into her eyes, clear, unwavering, alive, he felt something stronger than doubt, hope. As the night stretched on, they shared their stories. Broken pieces of childhoods, lonely years, the losses that shaped them. Two strangers with wounds that spoke the same language. By dawn, the desert winds carried the scent of pine and distant smoke. Ayasha stood at the edge of the ridge, pointing toward the horizon. "My home," she said quietly. "It waits." Elias joined her, the sun rising at their backs. He had trusted her once. He would do it again. Together they walked toward the canyon, toward her tribe, toward the turning point of everything that had yet to come. 17 sunrises had passed since they left the town behind. Dawn spilled across the desert in long golden stripes, lighting the dusty trail where the cowboy's weary horse dragged the small wagon forward. The Apache girl, no longer terrified like in the first days, sat quietly in the back, her dark eyes scanning the distant red cliffs as if trying to piece her lost memories back together. By noon, they stopped beside a shallow creek. She pointed toward the southwest, where jagged walls of red stone rose like a fortress built by the earth itself. "My village is beyond those cliffs," she said softly but firmly. "If they see me with you, they will not attack." The cowboy chuckled under his breath. "Well, I sure hope they're friendlier than the folks I left behind." She didn't smile. Instead, she looked down at her hands. "Not everyone is friendly," she murmured. "But my people, they are fair." They continued traveling until the sun dipped low, glowing like a burning coin on the horizon. Then at last, the land opened into a wide valley sheltered by red rock walls. Thin trails of smoke curled upward from small lodges made of wood and hide. Children's laughter echoed faintly. Apache riders patrolled the edges on horseback, and the moment they spotted the strangers, lances were raised. The girl immediately stepped down from the wagon and lifted both hands in a tribal gesture of recognition. An older warrior with 2 bold red paint stripes across his face pushed his horse forward. "Nahale," he called, her name, disbelief cracking through his voice. She ran to him, throwing her arms around his waist, her entire body shaking with months of held-back fear and relief. The village fell into stunned silence. Eyes turned, lots of them, toward the cowboy standing alone beside the wagon. He didn't reach for his gun. He didn't move. He simply stood there, hands relaxed at his sides, letting them judge him. The older warrior dismounted and approached slowly, his gaze sharp. "This man brought you here?" he asked her. She nodded. "He saved me." A murmur rippled through the gathered crowd. Another elder stepped forward, a woman with long silver hair braided with feathers. "You risked your life for one of ours," she said to the cowboy, "and you asked nothing in return." The cowboy shrugged lightly. "Just wanted to do what was right." The elders exchanged glances. The girl, Nahale, kept her hand on his arm, refusing to step away from him even under so many watchful eyes. Finally, the silver-haired elder spoke again. "Then hear the judgment of our council. A man who protects our daughter is a friend of this tribe. Our warriors will help you reclaim the land that was stolen from you. And if it is her wish," she looked at the girl, "you may take her as your wife." A hush fell over the entire valley. Nahale lifted her chin, not timid, not hesitant, and said, "It is what I want." The cowboy froze. For the first time since he lost everything, he felt something warm, steady, and terrifying rise in his chest. Hope. The drums of the Apache village began to beat, echoing against the cliffs like a promise etched into the stone of the desert. 4 days after reaching the Apache village, the cowboy found himself riding at the head of a formation he never imagined leading. 20 Apache warriors on horseback, their braids whipping in the wind, their painted faces stern with purpose. Behind him, Nahale rode her own horse, proud and steady, wearing a red bead necklace that marked her as a woman returned from captivity and under tribal protection. The closer they came to town, the more memories crawled up the cowboy's spine. The humiliation, the mockery, the look in the landowner's eyes when he demanded that sickening price. But this time the cowboy didn't ride in alone, desperate and cornered. He rode with a nation at his back. The moment their horses clattered down the main street, doors slammed, windows shut, and the entire town shrank into itself like a rattled snake. The landowner, dressed in his fancy vest and his crooked smile, stepped out onto the porch of his office with 2 hired guns flanking him. "What in hell is this supposed to be?" he barked. The cowboy swung down from his saddle. "This is justice." The hired guns reached for their pistols. But 20 Apache bows and rifles snapped up in a single unified motion. The guns froze mid-draw. Sweat trickled. The landowner tried to bluster his way through it. "You got no right bringing savages into—" Nahale's voice cut him off, calm as cold steel. "You held me like an animal. You sold people like cattle. Today, you answer for it." The landowner looked from her to the cowboy, to the silent wall of Apache warriors. His confidence drained like spilled liquor. The cowboy stepped forward. "You took my ranch through lies and threats. You're gonna sign it back, today." The Apache chief handed the landowner a paper and a pen. The old man's hand trembled as he scribbled his name. When it was done, the chief folded the document and gave it to the cowboy. "The land returns to its rightful guardian," he declared. The town watched from behind half-closed shutters. No one dared speak. The landowner tried one last spark of pride. "This ain't over." The cowboy looked him dead in the eye. "It's over for you." The Apache warriors turned their horses and rode out of town in a thunder of hooves, leaving the dust of judgment behind them. The cowboy and Nahale followed last, side by side, his hand brushing hers in quiet promise. By evening, they reached the ranch, the place where it all began. The sun dipped behind the hills, painting the house, the barn, and the open fields in warm gold. It no longer looked lonely. It looked like a beginning. Nahale slid off her horse and walked to the porch. "This can be our home," she said softly. "Only if you want it," the cowboy replied. She turned, eyes bright. "I chose you the day you untied me." The cowboy felt that same fragile, fierce hope rise again, as if the land itself was breathing with them. And under the wide frontier sky, with the dust settling and the world quiet for the first time in a long while, the cowboy and the Apache woman took their first steps into a life they would build together, not as captor and captive, not as outcast and wanderer, but as partners, as equals, as a new family on the frontier.